It's so important just to clear your head. And, breathing is kind of our access to our physiologic and psychological state, right? Mm-hmm.
Hi, friends. My name is David Small, and I'm going to be your host on this journey today. And we're trying something a little bit different, and I'm actually super excited for today's podcast. And you may have looked at the podcast and seen, oh my goodness, this podcast is 6 hours long. I'm actually not sure how long it's going to be, but we're trying something a little bit different. And typically when I've been doing an interview, I've been cutting them in half mostly. And just to try to keep things around the 1 hour mark. But lately and over this summer, I've been listening to some long form podcasts and the Jocko podcast or Sean Ryan show. And a couple of the podcasts on there are literally 4 or 5 hours long, and they're long form interviews. And they just, they do the whole interview in one episode rather than breaking it up into 2 or 3. And you can just pause it as you need to, and you can listen to whatever chunk of the interview you need to listen to and get back to it. And, as I'm riding the motorcycle or driving in my car, I often listen to something like a podcast. And if it takes me 2 or 3 or 4 episodes or 4 times, to listen to the one episode, then that's okay. And so if you need to pause this at 30 minutes or if you need to come back to it later on, then just pick it up where you left off. And that's fine. But if you have the means and the time to listen to it all in one shot, I think you get a better rhythm and a better flow. And so I just wanted to give this a shot with this episode. And I would appreciate your feedback. Let me know if you prefer breaking it up or if you prefer one shot and you can just control the timeline and how much you want to listen to at once. But I'm super excited for this interview. And maybe almost 20 years ago now, back in my hockey days, I was a hockey coach, and one of my first teams that I was working with was called the Penticton V's in the BCHL. And I was only maybe 20 something years old, maybe 23 years old or 22 years old. And my captain of the team that year was a guy named Brett Hextall. And Brett was an amazing captain and led our team. We couldn't have done it without him. And we ended up winning the league that year. We won a championship, and then we went on to the Western Canadian Finals. And Brett left us after that year and went to a scholarship with the UND Fighting Sioux, although they're no longer called the Fighting Sioux. They're called something like, Gophers, or anyways, I don't know what they're called. But anyways, Brett and I have been friends ever since that time. We try to get together at least once a year and hang out. And so recently I was down in Fargo and decided to go for a walk with Brett. And so we were downtown Fargo and we walked through a park and did some laps around a park and recorded this podcast there. And you guys know me well enough that I don't like to have a typical recording studio. I don't like to just sit in a nice cozy place and record a podcast, but rather I like to go out and do something or be somewhere interesting. And so in this podcast, in the interview with Brett, you will also hear some of the noises of downtown Fargo and things like kids playing in the park, which is a nice little background noise, and other noises that are not so nice, like motorcycles driving by, lawnmowers, whippersnippers, and just general traffic driving around the park. But that's just background noise to keep you interested and make you think that you're there with us. And actually, as I went back and listened to the audio, I heard some of the background noises, and I thought somebody was actually driving up next to me as I was listening in my car. But anyways, never fear. Brett is an amazing guy. Brett was a pro hockey player and then worked professionally in the NHL. And then he went on to start his own company, and he's going to tell you all about that, and also raising his family. he's a really incredible guy, and I just really think you're going to love this podcast, especially if you like hockey or hearing a little bit about kind of the behind the scenes of hockey. And anyways, there's tons here in this episode, and I really hope that you guys will support Brett and give him a shout out, or just get in touch with him. But without any further ado, let's get to the interview. This is a nice park, nice day.
Yeah.
Good. It always feels like it's a bit of an ordeal just to get out the door, eh?
Yeah.
Like
everything's an ordeal. Yeah. Nothing is easy. Nothing.
And
everything's difficult.
Okay, we're going to start this, okay?
We're recording now?
We're recording.
Okay.
Now you have a wife and 3 kids, and you we're here in this park, and it's like a big deal to get out of the park or to get out the door. But is this how you pictured your life to be at late 30s?
In some ways, I would say yes. Having a family is definitely really important to me. And in other ways, I think life just throws you curveballs. So,
like this morning when you can't find your wallet?
Like this morning when I can't find my wallet and I'm all flustered. Usually I like things to be in the same spots, and I like things that are known and routine, and kids kind of make that, they just throw that out the window.
Okay, we're going to come back to your kids in a minute, but so I met you in Penticton. What year would that have been when we won the
2000,
the Fred Page Cup?
6-7 or 7-8. I think it was 2007, 2008.
I had you only for 1 year, right?
Yeah, I think it was 07, 08.
And then you went to play at UND. Tell me about your hockey career.
So, after Penticton, I went and played at the University of North Dakota, which was an incredible program. Played there for 3 years. They've got probably the nicest arena in the world, literally in the world. Not the biggest. It only seats 12,000, but probably the nicest. Called the Ralph Engelstad Arena. And was there for 3 years. Signed professionally with the then Phoenix Coyotes, now Arizona Coyotes, or I guess now they're
moving, right?
They're the Utah Hockey Club. They don't have a name yet.
It's got a ring to it.
Yeah, but was signed with them after my junior year. So left school and played professionally for their minor league team, which was in Portland, Maine at the time, for 3 years. And I played for the Philadelphia Flyers minor league team for 1 year. And that was my playing career.
And then you stopped playing. Oh, wait. You got married to Mamie while you were at UND? Or not?
I had left.
When you were in Maine?
I had left, as while I was in Maine, and she was in medical school. So we were living apart, which was really difficult. But obviously with the schedule for medical school and the schedule of professional hockey, they don't make a lot of time, which was definitely part of the reason why I stopped playing. Like I had said, having a family was important to me, and I realized that wasn't going to happen anytime soon if we were living apart. And
so then you moved back to Fargo?
Nope. When I stopped playing, then we went to, Mamie was in a residency at this point at the University of Iowa hospital system. In Iowa City, Iowa. So the Hawkeyes.
And Mamie's a anesthesiologist?
She's an anesthesiologist, yep.
So she puts people to sleep?
She puts people to sleep. So if she ever wants me to shut up, she knows how to.
Does she ever drug you? And like when you're annoying her, does she ever sneak something into your coffee or?
Not that I'm aware of yet.
Okay.
But
okay, and so then you started working in the sports world.
Yep. Then after that, I started working. I worked for 5 years for the Philadelphia Flyers as a player development coach, and 2 years for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the same role.
Can you explain a little bit about what a player development coach does?
Yep. So if I don't have time, I usually just tell people I'm a scout, and that's the lion's share of what we do. But then the difference between us and a scout is we would only watch the players that we've drafted, because hockey's not like basketball or football where guys put in for the draft out of college. Hockey, you get drafted at 18, then you go to college. So there's this time where you've drafted a player
and they're not in your system, or they're not in your minor league team.
Yep. And so we kind of bridge that gap, before the time the player signs with us. Generally, we'd have 4 years to sign a guy, or a college guy anyway. And our role would be to basically keep in touch with their current college or junior coaching staff, kind of manage their progress, check into their summer training plans. It's a bit of a mentor / big brother role at times. We're not the management of the team. We're not the GM where the prospects need to be really guarded or feel like they need to be really guarded with what they say to us. They can talk about what they're struggling with. Yeah, I was up late last night. I had a bad game because I broke up with my girlfriend last night. I was up until 3 a.m. and things like that they might want to keep to themselves a little bit. That's kind of where we try to develop some trust with them, so we can help them through kind of some of those more difficult life situations and playing time with coaches. And there's all sorts of things that pop up for teenagers. Yeah. So we'd help them kind of manage that as well.
I'm just going to pause for a second.
Okay.
It's nice, we picked this nice park to walk in. You picked the noisiest park in all of Fargo to record our walking podcast. Okay, so wait, does every team have a player development staff member? Or, because I just seem to remember, back when I was involved in hockey, they had scouts, but I don't remember them having player development people.
Yeah.
Or not in the way that you were doing it, at least.
Yeah, it was definitely a newer area. I think now everybody does. Like, even when I came through with Phoenix, they didn't have anybody. Mm-hmm. Certainly not the way we do now. Our teams
when
do
you
now.
were a player in the minors or at UND, would you have liked to have you coming to talk to you and walk? Like, would you have benefited from that?
Yeah, and when I was doing that job, that was one of the things I thought of. Is like, I wish I had somebody who did this, and what would I have wanted help with, and what would I have benefited from them? Because
you were in their shoes one day.
Yeah, and I just think it's a valuable position. I think teams are still all, trying to figure out exactly how many people they need, staff members they need to cover, the amount of prospects they have, and depending on your, what stage your organization's in, if you're rebuilding or if you're a contending team, you don't have many prospects generally. So I think everyone's trying to figure out exactly the best way to do it still, but it's kind of a newer position.
I want to talk a little bit about Fit and Unbeatable Mind in a minute, but I just think it's interesting to think like what as far as mental training and mindset. Had you known that, like, how different of a player would you have been had you known that when you were a junior and a college player and in the pro systems? Like, if you had been able to apply the things that you know now, do you think it makes a big difference or what?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel fortunate that I think my parents instilled a lot of that in me from a young age. There was always kind of a importance on hard work. And I think everyone can say that, but I think it was expected of me more than most, I guess. It was definitely a point of emphasis. Like, so I feel lucky that I think I had a good jump start on mental toughness, on, battling through hard times.
Right.
I think what I didn't understand when I was younger, before I found Unbeatable Mind and SEAL Fit, was maybe the more introspective aspects of it, kind of the softer, there's the yin and the yang, the hard and the soft. Like, I think there's a balance between the two. And sometimes with a company like SEAL Fit, people can be intimidated because they think of Navy SEALs and, the water hoses being sprayed in your face and you're being yelled at and being demanded to do, extremely difficult exercises for long periods of time. And there's definitely an aspect of that and a time for that. And that's the hard. But I think then with SEAL Fit, and especially with Unbeatable Mind, it's kind of the sister company, same sets of skills. There's kind of the softer side to it of like, not everyone's going to be a Navy SEAL. Not everyone wants to be. And there's this balance of finding your purpose and understanding your passions and rest and recovery. And, Mark Devine, the founder, is like one part, cyborg Navy SEAL and one part yoga master. And he can kind of balance his way between those. And it's really cool to see the way he's able to do that. So I think that's maybe
in a different lifetime, would you have tried to join the teams? Do you think the SEAL teams?
Yeah, I think so. I do think so. Especially at that point in my life.
Do you think
you're younger?
For me, like joining the Army and then especially more so going to Burma, you realize what your body is capable of. And you realize, in the Army, we have a saying like, when you think you're done, you're only 20% done or something like that. And when you start to feel pain in your body, you still have like 90% more left to give. And you realize, and in Burma, when you have to walk, you have to get somewhere, you have no choice but to keep going. Like, you can't just say like, hey, we're done for today, we're going to check into the hotel. You literally cannot stop, and you have to keep going for 18 hours, and you realize, okay, I can actually do this. And what I was just thinking about is, does a bag skate, back in the day, and I don't know if teams still do this, but like you screw up or you have a bad game and you get on the line, coach blows a whistle, and you just have a bagger, guys are puking. Do you think it teaches them that? Or do you think it's just like punishment and it just sucks?
I think that's a matter of interpretation.
Okay.
I think you can be having the same bag skate and two players, even two coaches, can look at it completely differently. I choose to look at it as, because I think the real value in sport is not the sport. I think it's the lessons that it teaches you. And so I think if you look at your sport through that lens, everything becomes a lesson. And I think that's what people can benefit from the most. And I think especially in North America, where we are so achievement driven, it's important to stop and pause and put into perspective, especially with like youth sports with younger kids. It's like, hey, why are we really doing this? And there's things that we want.
What do I want my
our
kid to get out
to
of this?
learn?
Yeah.
And I think those are those lessons. Like, if the bag skate is punishment, like, okay, that's how it is here. Someday you're gonna have to work for a boss you maybe hate, and maybe you're playing for a coach you hate. Well, that's a great lesson. You don't run from that.
Right.
You learn how to deal with those tough situations. I think that's how I look at that. And the bag skates are definitely a little bit outdated now.
Do teams still do that?
Not very often. Not very often, no.
Man, getting old. Okay, so wait, I want to come back to your story for a second, because you got married to Mamie. You're playing out in Maine. She's going to school. You're doing a long distance thing. That's obviously not easy. And you decide, okay, I'm going to finish my hockey career. Was it hard? Did it how do you know when it's time to,
I just think of players and people that try to cling and hang on to their hockey career for what seems like a decade too long, and you just knew it was time to hang it up.
Yeah. I'm going to try and I can go a lot of different ways with this, so I'll try and keep it succinct, I guess.
Good luck.
And I'll put, I think your priorities.
Like deep down,
Yeah. And so that for me, there were a couple things that happened, like just, I got a little bit disenchanted with professional sports. When it becomes a business and people are definitely looking out for themselves. And in the past, I'd always been a part of really good teams and really good organizations like Penticton, like North Dakota. I played at Northwood School in Lake Placid, New York before Penticton, which was another great place, and always felt like you were playing for something greater than yourself. You were playing for, this school or this junior team or this college that had a great history, and you wanted to be a part of that and lay your legacy down. And, the teams were willing to do the difficult things, to block shots and for each other. And then I think in pro, there became a lot less of that and a lot more of guys looking out for themselves and what do I need? And, it's Christmas time and they're already checked out of what's going on with the team and they're signing their contract for the next season already somewhere else. And it was just, that was a bit just disheartening, I guess. And so that was part of it, just living away in general from, we got engaged and married and we're still living apart. And
did you have a honeymoon?
We did. Okay. We did. But, and then people would say like, oh, how great both of you are able to do this, chase your dreams while still, having your relationship. And that was, I guess that's a matter for interpretation too. But for me, it felt like, okay, we're not really getting started with
marriage,
our life.
Yeah.
And so then like our building was actually getting redone in Portland, Maine at the time. So we were playing our home games an hour north in a town called Lewiston, Maine. And I came out after a game. I think we got beat and it was, 11 o'clock at night and I had a voicemail from my wife saying, everything's okay, but I just wanted to tell you. And she had gotten home to her parents' house and her parents were out of town. It was just her and her sister-in-law. And there was somebody in the house and somebody outside the house. They were basically being robbed. And
oh my goodness,
my wife's sister-in-law saw the guy outside the house walking around from the back and, screamed, there's somebody in the house. And they locked themselves in the bathroom.
Oh man.
I called the police and they could hear somebody walking inside the house for a period of time. Anyways, they ended up, long story short, cops get there. The 911 operator tells them to go to the front door. The cops are waiting for them. They have the one guy, the other guy got away. They found, tens of thousands of dollars of stolen materials in the guy's car.
Oh man.
And the fact that running through my mind, what could have happened if her sister-in-law hadn't seen the guy walking around the outside and they walked in and there's a man in the house, what could have happened? And that was and where was I? And what was I doing, while this? So that was a pretty empty feeling. So that played into it.
And you feel like you want to be there to protect your wife, to protect your family.
That's my job, right?
And you're off on the other side of the country playing hockey.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was difficult. And it just became time. And so here comes, I've been following SEAL Fit, learning from them for a couple of years at this point. And I think some of the exercises they had, like written exercises, really helped give me some clarity. And I did those. I couldn't do them during the season because I knew where the answer was going.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be so checked out from my teammates before the season was even over. So I said, wait till the year's over and then really sort this out. So I took some time at the end of the season then and did some, written exercises and just took some time to introspect and get really clear with myself. And from there, it was just a super easy decision. And to have that clarity was just so freeing that no matter what anybody said, and I had lots of pressure to keep playing. And, everyone always says you should play as long as you can. And, but this gave me, clarity that was just freeing, and it didn't matter what anybody else said. And that was a very good feeling.
So you rejoined your wife while she finished her residency, and shortly after your first son was born?
Yep. So I went and joined her in Iowa where she was doing her residency. I interned at the University of Iowa Strength and Conditioning program during the time, and then trained for SEAL Fit's Kokoro Camp, which is a 50-some hour endurance event, team endurance event based off of Navy SEAL Hell Week. So I trained for that and did that, coached a little CrossFit, and then, had the internship. And then, Henry was born shortly thereafter in Iowa in the same hospital, oddly enough, that my wife was born in. Oh. And so that was a cool bit of serendipity.
Yeah. And Henry's full of energy.
Yeah, he keeps us on our toes, wears us out every day so we can sleep at night. He's got a lot of energy. So hopefully we can find a way to direct that towards the right thing as he gets older.
Just while we're on this topic, I'd like to talk about, you have Henry in a Montessori school. What is that, and what's your experience been with that style of education for your kids?
Yep. So Montessori was,
because this is a brand. I don't know if brand is the right word, right? But it's not just here; it's all over.
It's worldwide. It was founded by Dr. Maria Montessori.
Okay.
I can't remember if she was French or Italian, but it's a pretty cool history, the way it kind of came about and was formed, and the way she came up with her philosophies. Seems to be a much more intuitive way for young kids to be schooled. Here every toy has flashing lights and alarm bells, and there's overstimulation, and you go into most Montessori's and it's very plain, and things are made of wood, and there's not much for flashing lights and overstimulation. It's built in to have kind of one-on-one time with the teacher, and also individual workstations as well as collaborative work. And it just seems to make a lot more sense than maybe conventional schooling. And it's, it was really a game changer with Henry for us.
Can you tell me what you told me this morning before we were recording about your parent-teacher interview?
Yeah, so that's where I was going, is, we had him at kind of a different preschool, and we'd show up there and he'd have, blue frosting stained on his face and his tongue every day, and he'd be running around like a Tasmanian devil.
Full of food coloring.
And all
red
sorts
dye.
And so we ended up switching him to Montessori, in part because our daughter was born and we wanted her to start there, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah.
But so we got Henry in first, and then we were going to get Evie in as well. And we showed up after just a couple months there for the parent-teacher conferences. And, me and my wife were talking and thinking, how are we going to explain his high energy? And we'll tell her how hard we're working to, try and get rid of some of his bad habits, and, kind of the typical first parent, first child, or new parent, first child, explanations where you feel like you got to justify everything and explain yourself. And, how badly your parenting is going, because you're never a better parent than before you have kids. You know, you'll never do screen time, and you'll do this, and your kid's going to be perfect.
Oh yeah.
And then you have your kid, and you realize that's not how it works.
Who was it that said something like, "Everybody's got a good plan until you get punched in the face"?
Like Mike Tyson, I think.
Yeah,
That's exactly.
that's parenting.
That's parenting. And so then we go into the parent-teacher conferences, and you know, we're all ready for our excuses of why our kid can be so naughty and high energy, and we tell her that, and she just kind of looks at us with a blank look on her face, and she goes, "Well, I don't really see that here." And me and my wife kind of looked at each other, and we're both thinking the same thing. Like, oh my gosh, she is thinking the wrong kid. And we were just like, you know, Henry Hextall, like and she's like, yeah, he works well individually, and he's very quiet. And, you know, I don't see any of that behavior here. And we were just, couldn't believe it. And, you know, the longer we were there, and when we go to pick him up, we'd kind of see him in there working quietly and nicely by himself. And so Montessori, it was just a complete change for him.
Wow.
And that was a couple of years ago. And that exact teacher, we still have her coming. She's retired, but we have her, you know, come over once a week through the summer to kind of help tutor Henry a little bit.
Wow.
And I think just that approach has just been so good for him.
What was it? 2 years after Henry was born, then your daughter came?
Yeah, 2.5. Yeah.
2.5.
Yeah.
And Evie is adorable.
Yeah.
But Evie has Down syndrome. And did you find out about that before she was born, or when she was born?
Yeah, we found out before. And it happens both ways. Some people find out at the birth, which I think would be much tougher. But we found out beforehand. Now they can do the tests for gender so early, and they can
What
test.
do you mean? Kids can just choose their gender.
Right. And so we did the early test for gender, and then there's 4 genetic tests you can also do at the same time. And she turned up as whatever the highest marker was for Down syndrome, like, you know, highly likely
So
to have it. And then from there, if you choose, there's another test that is basically
confirm
99.99% accurate. And so then we did that test.
Can you take me through, feelings and thoughts as you get this news and this diagnosis? And how did you respond?
Yeah, it was, so Mamie came home from the grocery store, and I just heard her walk in from the garage. And then I just heard her crying, and my wife does not cry, hardly ever. And so she walked in, I could just hear her crying, kind of back in the entry. And I thought, in my mind, I was 100% sure somebody just died. We just got some news, her parent or somebody in our somebody's dead.
Your mind goes that way.
Because the way she was crying and the fact that she doesn't really cry often. And so I just got up and walked over to the entryway and just hugged her. Didn't even say anything for I don't know how long, but just hugged her and let her cry. And then, when she got to the point she could, talk, she said our baby has Down syndrome. So she had just gotten the call while she was at the grocery store and held herself together long enough to get home, and then she'd kind of let loose. And I kind of looked at her.
When you hear that, what goes?
Well, I looked at her, and I think what my expectation was, I kind of looked at her and I said, "No one's dead?" And she said, "What?" I said, "No one's dead?" She goes, "No." I said, "We're fine. This is fine." And then we hugged again, and I said, well, what's the gender? And he said, it's a girl. So that was a cool kind of, I held it together there for her for a couple hours. And then I think I hit my low point after that. And it's just the way our minds run away from us, I think, with situations like that. We start making the worst stories up in your head about, we start researching.
What did you know about Down syndrome prior to this?
Not a whole lot, although I did volunteer at Special Olympics in college.
Okay.
Which is funny. Like, you look back at things like that and you're like, was God preparing me then for what he knew my future was going to be? But we started doing all this research on Down syndrome and basically the health conditions that they can have, heart issues. There's a good percentage of newborns with Down syndrome that need open heart surgery.
Oh, wow.
And they have, I think it's obstructive bowel issues that require surgery. There's all types of issues that can happen. And we started looking at that. And then you hear some stories of kids that needed that, and they were in the hospital for months at a time. And it really got wearing on both of us. And it's, we bought all these books and we had to stop. We had to just stop reading them for a while and say, listen, whatever comes our way, we'll face it. But right now we can't wear ourselves down and be distraught by things that haven't even happened, that we're making up in our head could happen.
Right.
So then, and the hard part before Evie was born was that we didn't have her there to hug and to hold and to love. And then once she was born, it got so much better because we had her there. We could hug her. We could love her.
Right.
We could, as she got older.
She's a real person and not just this idea in your mind.
Yes. And we could give her love and receive her love and, make her laugh and look into her eyes. And it just became a totally different experience once we had her, here.
I'm okay. I see your kids once a year when I come visit, but the thing I mean, Evie is totally precious, and the thing I just see in her is just innocence and purity. And it's like she is just always pure with her feelings. If she's in pain, she's in pain. If she wants to cry, she cries. If she's happy, she smiles, and she is just really natural and pure with all of it. And it's really beautiful because we don't see that very often.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. One of the things there's like the one positive thing in the book that I'd read was something along the lines, there's two statistics. 99% of people with Down syndrome say they love their lives and are happy with themselves. And then there was another similar stat, it was like 98% say, they would change nothing about themselves, and, another something along those same lines.
Like if they had an option to say, like, I'm going to get rid of this, they wouldn't do it.
Right. And when I think about that, it's like, okay, let's take that same poll on typical people.
Yeah.
How many people would say they love their lives and they're happy with themselves? It's not 99%. I know that.
Yeah.
And with Evie, you wish every typical people were more like that. But yeah, she's just so pure, so innocent. She is what she is, or she is who she is. And it just allows us to take away some of those expectations like we might have for, our other kids in terms of, development and achievement. And for her, we just get to let her be who she is without feeling like we need to pressure her into, getting good grades so she goes to the right school and all these things. And her development is, there's moments of development that are quick and some that seem really long. And obviously her potential is not going to be where typical kids' potential is, but that's okay. And we just get to let her on her own time, hit her goals. And of course we want her to reach her highest potential so she can be as self-sufficient as possible and live a meaningful life. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about Gigi's Playhouse?
Yep. So Gigi's is a Down syndrome achievement center. It's 100% free of cost to all participants. They'll accept anybody with some sort of disability, autistic kids, etc. But all their curriculum is based around specifically Down syndrome. And they hold, classes from or programs for newborns all the way up through adults. And it's just, most are led by, like Gigi Fit, which is basically their exercise program, is led by physical therapists. And we're incredibly fortunate to have one here in Fargo, but they are nationwide.
How has it served your family, and what kind of community have you found through Gigi's?
I think that's probably the biggest thing, especially right away for new families than it was for us, is you just show up there. And obviously when they're newborns, they're not doing a whole lot. Just, we're singing songs and playing with little puppets and things like that at that point. But you just show up, and there's other parents with kids with Down syndrome as well. And you don't have to explain anything to anybody. You just show up and let the kids be kids, and you get to learn a lot from those other parents. It's just a place of acceptance and belonging. And it's just, I don't know, that feeling when you're going through a situation that you never expected to go through, and you feel like you know nothing, and you're trying to be the best parent you can. So to have that resource there is so invaluable.
Is there programming for Henry to, how has he learned to interact with his sister?
So they welcome siblings there as well. And I think it's great. I think Henry's just at the point now he's starting to realize, especially as he sees, teenagers and adults with Down syndrome. But up until kind of recently, I think Evie's just his little sister, and still to a large degree she is. And he knows she has Down syndrome, but I don't think he totally gets what that means. But as he sees the teenagers and adults more, I think he's beginning to kind of get a grip on that. And it's nice. That also brings out another side of him, just his, just that big brother side where he's teaching her and helping her and holding her and lifting her. And she's walking now, but, there's certain situations where it does help, when he can pick her up and put her onto, a play set or whatever it is. And, I think that's going to be really valuable for him and for her. But for him as a kid growing up, we always say, or my wife always says, God gave us Evie. But he gave Evie Henry. And that's pretty cool. And I think the type of kid that he is, as he gets older, for us, it feels nice to know that she'll be well protected.
And then a few years passed, and then Cal came along this last fall. And was there any hesitation on your guys' part about having another kid? Did you think okay, we're going to have our hands full with these two? Or did you just think we want to have a third? And how did you face that?
Yeah. Well, as you get older, the risk goes up to have a kid with Down syndrome, and it goes up. I can't remember the percentage, but it goes up significantly if you've already had a kid with Down syndrome.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we were kind of, it's like the older we get. So it's like, okay, for the longer we wait, the higher it gets.
Mm-hmm.
We're already at this.
You've already had one.
So, yeah. And yeah, I mean, we thought about it, but we were pretty set on it. Crossed our mind.
Was it a discussion at any point, or?
It wasn't. Yeah, it was a discussion. I think just in terms of awareness, it was never like, hey, let's not do this, because, and we were like, if we have another one with Down syndrome, great.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, not a deterrent.
I think you told me this, but somebody told you, and then you were telling me this several years ago, that God only gives kids with Down syndrome to families that can handle it, and that it must mean that you and Mamie can handle it. And I just see in your parenting style, in your lifestyle, in your mindset, that you guys are great parents. And it's such a gift. I mean, Evie's such a gift for you, but I think you guys are such a gift to all three of your kids, and you guys definitely can handle it. But it probably wasn't what you were expecting.
No, and I think we do feel fortunate, especially to be born, and for her to be born in these times. I mean, even up until like the 80s, people with Down syndrome were pretty much just institutionalized. A lot of them were just put in some sort of housing and basically just left. And there's stories like that are just crushing.
Yeah.
So we feel really lucky she was born in today's day and age, where the acceptance and the resources are so much better than they ever have been. And, we do our best, and we feel like, we're capable of handling this. But I think without the community, without Gigi's Playhouse, without her therapists, like we call them our dream team. She has physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, and they're our dream team. And their support and their knowledge and the warmth that they bring on top of that is, it'd be a much different experience without them. So we're just super thankful that we have people, not only that, but our parents, both sets of our parents, or our kids' grandparents are around to help and support us as well. And, without them, it would be a much different situation.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears to Seal Fit.
Okay.
And Unbeatable Mind. And first of all, how did you get into it? And then can you explain a little bit about what is it?
Okay. I found it my second year pro, which was, I think, 2010, fall of 2010. And I think your mind kind of wanders, right?
Not mine. Mine's like a steel trap.
I guess that it was in the back of my head that maybe a military career was for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started kind of exploring that and Googling stuff. And this also was the year I didn't have cable, which I chose not to have cable.
Okay.
And I had like 3 fold-up tables, a blow-up mattress. I slept on a blow-up mattress the whole year.
So this is a pro hockey lifestyle?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, this is all by choice, but I just wanted to simplify everything. And like minimalist kitchen utensils. And anyways, it left me a lot of time to explore and kind of see. And so I bought a bunch of books. I bought like an ASVAB book, the military, education testing basically. And just started looking at stuff and was looking into the Navy SEALs. And I was given the book Lone Survivor, or suggested the book by...
is that Marcus Luttrell?
That's Marcus Luttrell's story, which is now a movie.
Yeah.
But at the time, the book had just come out when I was in college, actually. And one of my suite mates, who was in the ROTC program at the time, recommended it and bought that. And so I was like super curious about SEALs, started looking up how to become a Navy SEAL, and found SEAL Fit, which at the time I think was strictly kind of a had just come out of
His book.
the phase of the business that they were just training Navy SEAL candidates.
Oh, okay.
So I think these, potential candidates would go there to SEAL Fit HQ in Encinitas, California, and train for periods of time. And they had those, they had the Kokoro event then.
Wait, I'm going to pause for a second. How are we doing for time? Like, do you need to get back at a certain time, or are we good? Is your
I think we're good.
babysitter leaving? And
No, she's there, and maybe should be home soon.
Okay, good. Keep going.
And so they were just, and then around Encinitas, I believe I'll get the story right, civilians basically started seeing all these
People.
kids running around with, looking like their hair was on fire, full of energy, super fit, and said, hey, can we get in on this? And so they kind of opened it up to civilians, and I think this is just a couple, probably 2 years at that point when I found them, they started doing that. And so I started following some of their workouts. I found an event, a 20X they call it, which was a 12-hour event as opposed to the 50-odd hour event. And when my season ended for hockey, I could stay at my parents' house and attend this event in Pennsylvania like 3 days later. And so I signed up, got in touch with the gentleman, his name is Jim Rutan, who owns CrossFit Honor, and he was hosting the SEAL Fit event. And he gave me some workouts and things to do to prepare, and they crushed me. And it was much different training than hockey. And
I mean, you're in pretty good shape at this point. Like, you've been a pro athlete.
Yeah.
So you think like, okay, you're not a slob.
Right.
But it crushed you.
At the same time, you're intimidated because it's like, SEAL Fit, and the supremely fit SEALs, and it's just I'll say it's a different in shape than hockey on many levels. Just the upper body work and stuff is a lot different. But I was.
So for a 12-hour, it's a 12-hour thing, the 20X.
Yeah.
What do you do for 12 hours?
And this event too was, based off Navy SEAL Hell Week. So you're doing a lot of just the calisthenics. Usually starts off with like a big bang, which they'll call breakout. And they're just trying to get anybody who will get too overwhelmed by kind of the pressure of that just to kind of drop out. Now they want to train people. They don't want you to drop out.
Okay.
And you're paying to do this. So they want to pass you, and they're going to help you, and they're going to pull you aside if you try and quit. They'll pull you aside and talk you through.
Try to motivate you.
Just, try to give you some perspective and help you. And, but so, a lot of calisthenics, doing the ice bath stuff. This one wasn't by a body of water, so we weren't, doing any of the water stuff that you'll typically see. The SEALs do, but lots of bear crawling. And, there's a lot of teamwork too. Like, I think that's part of the thing that SEAL Fit and Unbeatable Mind brought to me was like that longing for being part of something bigger than yourself and having that team that you need to depend on each other. You show up as an individual, but you're going through these events with a group of people that really quickly you have to figure out that you need each other to have success during this event.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of lessons within that. It's easier to keep up than to catch up, and finding ways to help your teammates who are struggling, and things like that. So it kind of checked that box for me.
What were you hoping to get out of it? Like, why bother putting yourself through that?
I wanted to see if I could do it, what I was capable of, I suppose.
Okay.
And because at that point I was thinking like, is a military career for me? Well, here's a good test. And it was new, and I'm drawn to that physical challenge and like that team mentality, which I don't know that I expected that as much as I got through those events, but it kind of scratched that itch for me. And then it gave me, like I said, it kicked my butt, and I was in pretty good shape. And I took a lot of pride in being one of the guys at the beginning of the year who was in the top, few guys in fitness testing and things like that. And then I got there and, had a really tough time even passing their initial, push-up test. and things like that. And I think it showed me how much left I had,
Yeah.
to improve myself. And, just when you think you're in good shape and you're a professional athlete, you get humbled.
Yeah. What is from a mental standpoint, what is the core tenets of Unbeatable Mind?
Well, that's a 12-month course.
Okay, so there's a lot.
But yeah, but I'd say as far as like a quick, what we could get out of just a conversation like this would be a certain, like, to walk away with a set of skills. Is breathing is number one. Everything always comes back to breathing.
What do you
And
mean?
these guys, like, you get these Navy SEALs or these scary looking guys, combat veterans,
Thick, tatted up,
just
warrior.
And then you hear them saying things to guys who are struggling, like, hey, you failed that PT test. Get over it. Let it. And then pouring water on the guy saying, just get over it. Whispering in his ear, get over it. Let it wash off you, just like this water. Like water on a duck's back. Just let it fall off and get ready for the next challenge. In kind of a mentoring, gentle way. And you're like, wow, okay, there's depth to these guys.
Like they're not screaming in each other's faces.
They're not screaming in your face what a wimp you are. And there's a time for that too. But, there's also a time when they would throttle it down and say things like that to people.
And so when you talk about breathing, give me an example of an exercise or something that you learned about breathing that maybe you didn't do well as a hockey player.
Yeah, and so Mark Devine, the founder, kind of popularized box breathing, which some people may have heard of, which is a 5-second inhale, 5-second hold, 5-second exhale, and a 5-second hold, after the exhale, and continue. So he calls it box breathing, and you kind of see it everywhere now, but he popularized that years ago. And that's one. And the other they would talk about is, there's many names for this one too, the combat breathing, warrior breath, whatever you want to call it. It's a 4-second inhale, 4-second exhale. And they're teaching that now in the U.S. military anyway. And maybe you've been...
I remember when I was taught, we were taught you always take a pause 2-3, and pause 2-3 is like all hell is breaking loose around you, and you need to make a decision or you need to do something. But before you do that, you should do a pause 2-3 where you're breathing, and then get my bearings, get my situation, what's going on. And I remember a day in Karenni State in Burma. And we had been mortared probably 200 times that day. We actually had a young guy who was keeping track of how many mortars came in. And he lost track at like 120. And it was only 10 a.m. And then at 5 p.m., I had to make a decision because they were about to blow up a bridge. And we wouldn't be able to get out from where we were if the bridge was gone. And the Burma army was advancing and there was mortars coming in. And everyone was looking at me like, should we go back or should we stay here? What do we do? And I remember just saying, like, everybody shut up, just stop. I need to think for a minute. And I just remember stopping and doing, pause 2-3, breathe for a second. Let's think about this. Let's try to get some blood, some oxygen to the brain and make a decision. But it's so important to just to take a breath.
It's so important just to clear your head. And, breathing is kind of our access to our physiologic and psychological state, right? I mean, we are actually controlling the hormones released in our bodies when we control our breathing. And so as soon as you take control, our minds run away with us, with anything, especially in a situation like that. And it's easy to make mistakes. But when you breathe and you're controlling the cortisol, coursing through your system, the stress, everything, and now you can make a better decision. And especially like the military application of like, you are choosing in combat to end someone's life. And when you're under stress, it's easy to make mistakes. So what a difference it makes just to breathe. It's free medicine. and you
But
take back control of our.
I think I also see you doing it with Henry, for example. And if Henry's being crazy and if he talks back to you, I sometimes just see you like take a deep breath and like kind of sigh it out, but maybe it's just a sigh of, oh my gosh, what's going on here? But you do also, it's not only for military, like
No.
you can apply this to everyday
No,
life.
absolutely. And that's like in my old job, and now I started my own business where I'll be kind of mentoring and teaching these skills. But if they're teaching it in the military and it works, then you think it's not going to work during your hockey game when you want to yell at the ref, or when you're parenting and you want to spank your kid, or in any given situation. It's like, this clearly works, and the more we can build it into a habit where we don't have to, where we're always breathing 4 inhale, 4 exhale, and calmly, and not having to realize after the fact that I made that mistake because I didn't do a pause.
Right, you react rather than
respond. Right, and I heard this once. When there's an accident, they don't call the first reactors; they call the first responders, because they're trained on how to respond properly. And that's basically what we need to do with our breathing: train ourselves to breathe right so that we can respond to a situation rather than react. And I can go into
okay, yeah. I mean, we could talk all day about some of these things, but my question, and I want you to expand on SEAL Fit and Unbeatable Mind a little bit more, but I want you to also, my question is, throughout your story, I'm curious where your faith comes into play and how your faith has impacted your journey as a pro athlete, and then, as a father, and where you are today. But we talk like unbeatable mind and mental toughness and mental strength and these kind of things. I believe that our faith and our spirituality should be tough. It shouldn't be, and especially as like Christian men, I don't think we're meant to be wussies and wimps. Like, I think we're supposed to be strong, and our faith and our beliefs should guide that as well. And so I'm curious how faith and spirituality plays into your story, but also comes into play when it comes to things like Unbeatable Mind.
Yeah, so
maybe that's a big question.
Before I answer that, I'll just finish like the other 3 skills left. Our internal dialogue.
Okay.
Basically controlling the voice in your head that's usually shouting some negative thing. The other would be visualization or imagery.
Okay.
Which we can go down a huge rabbit hole in that, but we won't.
Okay.
And the final one would be micro goals, like just chunking. How do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
1 bite at a time.
Yeah.
During SEAL Fit Kokoro camp, it's 50 some hours, and people get overwhelmed. Like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. We've only been at this for 10 hours. So I've got 40 plus hours left. I can't do this. But if you look at it and say, I just have this next mile to run, this next half mile, this next short event, chunking everything down. So big challenges can seem a lot more manageable when you look at them that way.
We'll talk about Hextall development in a minute, but I didn't want to get too deep into all of it, because I kind of want some of our listeners to contact you at Hextall Development and pay you some money to coach them on Zoom or
I love it.
Something like that. So then you can really get deep with all of this stuff.
So then to faith,
I
guess this to start, I think, as I said earlier, I kind of had a bit of a head start maybe on this stuff in terms of like my parents. It was kind of expected to be mentally tough and to battle through, setbacks and this. And, my mom was always for me a huge example of what faith was. So we grew up going to church. I never got too far from church or from God, I would say, but it was kind of going through the motions, doing what you kind of think you're supposed to do. And, Sundays were Sundays, and kind of the rest of the week was the rest of the week.
I sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
I remember when we were in Penticton
Yeah.
and we were going into the finals. We were trying to win the league, and then we went on to the Western. And I wasn't at the time going to church, but I remember during playoffs, me and Freddie and some of the players, we all started going to church. And it was kind of like, I'll take whatever I could get. Like, if this is going to help me, it's not going to hurt me, and I'll take what I can get, and hopefully it'll help me win and just be in good, all good karma.
Yeah. So it was, yeah, I was one of those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It was
You and Wags and some of the other guys.
Eli Grossman.
Grossman, yeah.
And I want to say there might have been more, but yeah, we started going, and that was kind
Maybe
of
Mitch.
told to me. Oh yeah, Mitch is probably there. Yeah. And you know what? I did something similar actually in high school too. I think ended up going to a Catholic church one Sunday when I was at boarding school, just walking through Lake Placid, and we're just like, oh, let's go to the church service. And so I was never too far from it. Always kind of felt that call, but again, it was going through the motions. I would say in college.
Sorry, can I just interrupt again?
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I have a really crazy story about Pastor Vic. Pastor Vic was the pastor at that church,
Okay.
but he's now the chaplain for JTF2, the Canadian Special Forces.
No way.
And he's based in their training area, and he's the Special Forces chaplain for Canada.
No way. I wonder how that happened. I'd love to hear.
But I have, like, he and I have run into each other in the Army a lot, and it's a crazy story. But anyway, sorry, go on.
That is crazy. I would say college was a huge jump for me in my faith. I started going to church there, and there's also an organization called Hockey Ministries International that would send, pastors in, and, we'd meet once a week, or maybe it was once a month, every other week. Anyways, fairly regularly. And, they'd have a quick message, and, we'd pray and chat.
Do most pro teams have a chaplain?
Yes.
Do all pro teams have a chaplain?
I believe, if not all, almost all.
Okay.
And then I became good friends with the pastor of a church in Grand Forks, and I would go meet him for lunch. And I literally would write down, in college, I wore t-shirts that always had a pocket on the chest, and I would carry around a little notebook and pen there. People would make fun of me all the time.
You're such a nerd.
I just
like you, okay, you're a tough guy and you're fit, but you are a big nerd.
My brain is too slow. I needed to write stuff down.
Yeah.
And
now you have a phone.
I would write down questions. And then when I would meet him for lunch, I would ask him questions, and we'd just sit there and talk, and became close with him. Ended up getting baptized there in Grand Forks in college. And then, as I played professionally, we had a Hockey Ministries chaplains for all those teams as well, and couldn't go to church because we would play almost all Sundays afternoons.
Yeah.
And then after that, in Iowa, and luckily my wife is also a woman of faith, so I never had to kind of work on her, and that was an important part of why I chose her as well. But we kind of searched for churches in Iowa, and then when we moved up here, to Fargo, we definitely church shopped for a while before finding the church that we're at now, where has just been amazing, and we've gotten involved, volunteering.
You're helping with the youth group now?
Yeah, so we both volunteer, fairly regularly with kids for like the 8 a.m. or 8:45 service, and then we'll go to the 10 o'clock service. And then, I was doing youth Wednesday nights, youth group as well. And it's just been a really great growing experience for me, not only to give back to the kids and hopefully be the shepherd that I wish I had at their age, but then how you grow in your own faith from being in that role as well has just been, now I feel like my faith is so far past where I was when I was younger, to a place I probably didn't really think I'd ever get to. So
how do you balance, or how do you wrestle with maybe things like, especially when you're in college, where, you play games, the weekend's done, everybody wants to go drinking, everybody wants to party, everybody wants to live the college life. How how do you wrestle with these kind of things? Or do you?
You do, or I did. I think I, for the most part, felt that pull enough to maybe be slightly more responsible than a typical college kid.
I mean, without getting into too much details, you and I have had some irresponsible moments
Yeah,
in our history.
yeah. And still like trying to show up for a service, I think.
Uh-huh.
And I think that is part of, you know, I wouldn't do that now, obviously, but as a college kid, things are a little different. You're a little more immature and unable to make maybe some smarter decisions. But I think still the fact, for me anyway, to be able to show up that next morning, maybe not feeling the greatest, but still feeling God's acceptance, and that even though I'm feeling guilty about last night, that he still accepts me and this is where I need to be.
I always have some, I don't know if respect is the right word, but I just think there's like people who show up on Sunday morning with the hangover and maybe smell a little bit like beer, but at least they're there.
Yeah.
And they've got this assurance that I can make mistakes and God is still going to accept me. And I think that's genuine and practical faith.
Yeah, I do too. And
I don't like say that that's how we should all do it, but like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? It's
there's this judgmentalness that can come with faith, you know. It's easy to start judging people and say they shouldn't be doing that. And not that that's wrong, but our job isn't to judge them. I think our job is to love them. And they showed up. And you can bet that if they're showing up in that condition, there's maybe a reason why. And a better way as a Christian to be would just be to love them than to judge them. And hopefully, you know, we don't all start the journey in the same place. We all don't end in the same place, but to meet that person where they're at in their faith. And we might have to take, you know, a step down the ladder to meet them there. And as long as we can get ourselves back up. But yeah, so that's kind of how it was for me. And then as I grew and matured, I continued to be able to take.
Do you think faith and spirituality complements Unbeatable Mind and Seal Fit kind of stuff, or is it totally separate? How does it work?
I combine it. I know they're pretty open with their interpretation of spirituality. I think just for the fact to not alienate people and their belief systems. But for me, it's super easy to plug in, you know, they'll use the word intuition usually rather than spirituality, although sometimes they will. And for me, it's easy to say, intuition is the Holy Spirit talking to us, or, you know, and I think we limit God if we don't think that his creation can hold other things. You know, it goes a bit towards that conversation we were having the other day of we're putting God in a box if we can only experience him on Sundays.
Right.
And that's the only way to do it. And it's like, he's given us all sorts of gifts on this earth. And I think, you know, he cares about our heart. And if our heart is there, you know, there's the old argument, like Christians shouldn't do yoga because that opens you up to all sorts of spiritual things. And it's like, well, can't that be a practice from God that he gave us, you know, to center our well-being and health and enjoyment and peace and serenity? Like, isn't he those things? And couldn't he have given us that gift? I just think it's where our heart is. I mean, it's through those things. And
you talk about meditation, and like meditation, people are like, whoa, that's for Buddhism. But it's literally in scripture, like to meditate on the word of God, to meditate on God. But we have these words and we have things just get like a twisted viewpoint. And especially in the church, it happens a lot. Like, oh no, you can't do yoga. Man, you also can't touch your toes. Try a downward dog, man. So
I just think that's getting a little bit too tight and restrictive on God and what he wants us to experience. And also you're kind of, I don't know, you're making assumptions about a person and their practices or what they're opening up to, and you don't really know what's going on in their heart and their mind during those.
Okay, so you were coaching, you were doing player development, and you stopped doing that about a year ago. Is that right?
Yep.
About this time last year,
about
right?
this time last year. Yep.
And now you've started Hextall Development.
Yep.
And you have a website.
Yep.
Hextalldevelopment.com.
That's it.
And tell me about Hextall Development. What's the goal? What are you doing? What's your hopes and dreams for this?
Yep. So that's just taking kind of my experience as a hockey player, as a SEAL fitter, unbeatable mind person, or practitioner, maybe would be the right term, and giving back kind of those skills and the mindset that I've been able to use and learn through my life, and pass them on and coach them.
And who is it for? Is it for athletes? Is it for CEOs? Is it for farmers?
It's for everybody.
Okay.
It's for everybody. My focus, I'll start, obviously because of my past, starting with hockey players, kind of teenagers. And I hope to work with adults. They're a little more self-aware than teenagers at some point, but no, it's for everybody. It's kind of a lifestyle.
Do you want to, while we're back at our intersection here, do you want to jump in the truck and drive to the ice cream place, and we'll keep recording while we're driving?
Yep.
And for our listeners, Brett bought ice cream for his wife last night and then left it at the ice cream shop, and he's hoping it's still there.
We put it back in the freezer so that
his wallet might be in the freezer too, next to the. Okay, sorry.
Hopefully it is.
That'd be nice, actually. Okay, so can you do this kind of mental coaching, mental toughness training? I don't know what the terminology is, but can you do it on Zoom? Can you do it online?
Yeah.
Or does it have to be face-to-face?
No, you can definitely do it. Definitely do it on Zoom. I think that's one nice thing about today's day and age is we've kind of gotten used to doing things, through Starlink or but definitely can be done on.
So if somebody wanted to do this, they could go to your website and they could shoot you an email through the website, contact you. And what would it look like? What would a first session kind of look like?
Yeah, so we meet every other week. That kind of seems, in the coaching world, that kind of seems to be the right amount of time for somebody to try some new practices in their life and have enough time to kind of gauge whether it's working or whether it's not, or if other changes need to be made.
Right.
So 50 minutes every other week. And I think the longer you go, the more insight is gained. And like I said, it's kind of a lifestyle thing. So it's the more you can add little pieces into your routine that will benefit you, the better. I don't think you need to make wholesale changes, although, maybe, but that's not the way to make lasting change. It's, little bits into your routine at a time. And so we talk, we kind of co-create the relationship, how exactly is this going to work? What do they need from me? Because ultimately I'm there to serve them. So what experience can I give them that's going to work? And that's how I see my role. So we talk, I'll ask them to keep a journal. We'll focus on certain lifestyle things within that journal. And when we sense changes need to be made, we'll talk about that, implement some small changes and see where that goes, and rinse and repeat, as well as there is kind of some curriculum I have to, I don't want to say lecture, but basically to teach certain skills to the client.
So I think it'd be, I think it's really awesome. And I think it would be beneficial for some people. I even think of people who I know overseas, like in who work as missionaries, that this kind of training would be beneficial to them. And I think it's beneficial to everybody. And when I was coaching, I wasn't the greatest player, but I was able to work with people's minds and mental toughness and kind of relate to them on their level and say, like, hey, what are you struggling with? And how do we get the next step? How do we get the next little bit out of you? And I think it applies to everybody and is important for everybody.
Yeah. And just having a teammate who is or coach, who's kind of watching you that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the old saying, it's hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle.
Mm.
And sometimes having an outside perspective is all you need to see things a little more clearly. Someone to make a suggestion and give you that aha moment of realizing something. And I think, for missionary work, like can be some very high stress stuff.
Yeah.
And with decisions having, significant impacts. And so the more clear-headed you can be in those situations and the less, frazzled,
mm-hmm.
When things don't necessarily go your way or you're up against the wall, so to speak, obviously the better the outcome, not only for yourself, but for your team and those that you're leading.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up because we're at our ice cream shop, but I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
While you look for a parking spot.
Yeah.
So first one is favorite exercise.
I like burpees or lunges.
Oh, gross.
Probably.
I hate burpees. How many do you ever do? What's the most number of burpees you've done in a day?
I think 1,000.
1,000 in one day?
I think so.
You're crazy.
At least 1,000, if not more. It's for sure 1,000.
Okay, book recommendation? Or a couple books recommendations?
Yep. I always thought when I got asked this, I would be able to spit it out quickly. I would say, and we were just talking about the other day, Tribe by Sebastian Junger,
Mm-hmm.
I recommend a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The Coddling of the American Mind,
Mm-hmm.
which I recommended to you the other day, and you told me you wouldn't read.
That's not true. I read it.
That is one of the best.
It's too smart for me, though.
That's a pretty life-changing book, especially when it comes to dealing with like this next generation coming up. Lone Survivor, obviously, but that's a movie now. The Harry Potters.
Okay. What's one of your favorite songs or bands you're listening to right now?
I'm really into Judah and the Lion right now. We saw them live in concert not too long ago, and they were so good. Their new album is phenomenal. But usually what I listen to, I'll listen to a lot of Christian music and a lot of 90s punk.
Oh, like what you would listen
Rock
to in the dressing room music from your childhood?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Every time I hear a song that comes on the radio from like that era, it just takes me right back to the hockey locker room pregame, listening to Green Day.
Yeah.
Oh,
or like Linkin Park.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay. And how about any final words of wisdom or final thoughts, final comments?
I kind of want to use like Wim Hof's, and he curses, so I won't say the curse, but breathe, you idiot. Or maybe like, yours, the pause 2-3 or warrior breath, something like that for people to pause. And I think life's a journey, and that we constantly need to be improving ourselves because there's people that need us. And it's a big responsibility to be in that position. So we owe it to ourselves and to our team and our families and the people around us and to this earth to constantly be on this journey to improve ourselves, to make the most of ourselves so that we can serve humanity and hopefully leave this place better than we found it.
You know,
So
I remember like a mentor of mine saying, and he's talking about his wife, but he said, I can't give my wife my heart if my heart is broken. And I need to do the work. And I just think like what you're saying now is like, you know, we owe it to our people. We owe it to our families. We owe it to the people that work for us, alongside us, that we work for, to do the work in our lives, whether it's in our hearts, in our minds, to be better for them. And so it's not just like, this is just what I've got. This is what I am. And so.
Yeah. And the other saying that too is hurt people hurt people. So if you don't fix yourself, you are hurting people. It's like your mind is, if you're not actively taking control of your mind and making the most of yourself, it's being shaped for you by the outside forces. If you're not shaping it yourself intentionally, and then you're hurting people.
Right.
So it's hard enough not to hurt people when you are making the most of yourself and trying to do everything right. So it's a big responsibility to make the most of yourself and to serve humanity, which ultimately I believe is what we're here for, you know, to love and to serve. And if God's put you in a leadership position, which everybody's a leader, whether you realize it or not, people are watching you. And it's a big commitment and a big responsibility to do that.
Well, thanks, Breder, for what you're doing here and for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience with people. But yeah, I think it's awesome. And I hope people will listen to this and be encouraged themselves. And if nothing else, that they'll just stop for a second and take a deep breath, and maybe somebody will reach out and get some coaching.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Always love your visits every year and catching up.
Yeah. When are you coming to Burma to teach this to our students?
In 12 days.
Oh, okay. Perfect. See you there. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Breder.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.